Asterisk, the elevator jolted, lights flickered, and suddenly, we were trapped. 4 of us, my formidable boss, 2 ambitious colleagues, and me suspended between floors in total darkness. No way out, no distractions, just our fears and truths laid bare. That night, inside a metal cage, we discovered something that would change our lives forever. Not just a project, not just a career, but a light that could make us impossible to ignore. And hey, if you love stories that reveal the drama, the struggle, and the triumph of real human connections, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Asterisk, the thing about corporate treadmills is, you don't even notice you're on one until your knees start to ache and your lungs are screaming. That was me 3 years into my career at Lantras Global, a promising data analyst who had somehow become an expert at writing other people's reports, fixing other people's mistakes, and sitting through endless meetings where my name was misspelled on the agenda. I wasn't failing. That was the problem. I was doing fine. Too fine, reliable, solid, invisible. At 8:47 p.m. on a Thursday night, my office floor looked like a graveyard of cubicles. Half-empty coffee cups, abandoned blazers on chairs, sticky notes with reminders like, call mom, that would never be called. Everyone else had escaped hours earlier. I was the lone survivor under the sterile hum of fluorescent lights. I closed the last Excel window, hit save, and leaned back. My back cracked like an old wooden floorboard. My laptop screen reflected my own tired face. A brown guy in his early 30s with messy hair and bags under his eyes that no moisturizer could fix. Another night of glory. I muttered to myself. Chicago skyline stretched outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, jeweled in neon and headlights. It was beautiful, but in that moment it felt taunting, like the city was alive and I was paused. I shut the laptop with a heavy clap. My reward system was simple. Hot shower, glass of bourbon, collapse into oblivion. That holy trinity kept me going. I grabbed my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and made my way to the elevators. The hallway was silent except for the low buzz of servers in the IT closet. I pressed the down button and the polished steel doors slid open with a soft chime. The car was empty. I stepped inside, letting my head fall back against the cool wall. For a moment, I allowed myself to close my eyes. My temples pulsed. That's when I heard heels clicking fast on the marble floor. A woman's voice rang out firm, crisp, commanding. Hold it. The doors shuddered, then slid back open. A flash of red fabric appeared first, followed by a woman who could command an army with a single eyebrow. Amani Cole, Vice President of Strategy. She stepped in like she owned not just the elevator, but gravity itself. Behind her, 2 younger women hurried in. Kiara James, the marketing strategist with a firecracker laugh, and Zoe Lee, the data scientist who always seemed like she was carrying a secret equation in her head. I straightened instinctively, as though slouching was a punishable offense. Evening, Ms. Cole, I said, my voice a little too formal. Amani gave me a curt nod. Her hair was pulled into an elegant updo, and that red dress. God, it was power woven into fabric. She was in her mid-40s, ageless in that way people become when they've survived wars you'll never understand. Kiara smirked at me, her white button-down perfectly crisp even at this hour. Late night, Evan? She asked, the usual. I said, forcing a smile. Zoe just offered a quiet, sympathetic glance before slipping into the corner. The doors closed. The elevator hummed as it began its descent. I could feel the awkward tension settle in. Being alone with your boss was one thing. Being trapped in a steel box with your formidable boss and 2 of your ambitious colleagues was a different kind of social hell. We passed the 35th floor. Then 34. Then 33. And then, with a violent shudder, the elevator jolted to a stop. The lights flickered. My stomach dropped. For one grotesque second, the fluorescent bulbs strobed across our faces, turning us into startled caricatures. Then darkness swallowed everything. A collective gasp. Are you kidding me? Kiara muttered. In the pitch black, I felt the air thicken. My pulse hammered in my throat. Then, a sharp beam of light cut through the void. Amani's phone flashlight. Of course. Calm, steady, precise, like she'd rehearsed for this exact moment. She swept the beam over the control panel, pressing the door open. Nothing. Tried a few other floors. Nothing. Finally, she pressed the red emergency button. A burst of static, then a distorted voice crackled through. This is building security. We're showing a major power outage across downtown. You're going to have to hang tight. For how long? Amani asked, her tone like a scalpel. No nonsense. No room for evasion. Silence. Then, could be an hour. Could be several. The line went dead. I exhaled through my nose, a knot tightening in my stomach. I wasn't claustrophobic, but being suspended between floors with my boss and colleagues? That was a custom-made purgatory. Kiara groaned. Perfect. Just perfect. I tried to keep my voice light. So, what's the protocol here? Start rationing breath mints? No one laughed. The silence grew thick like wet cement. I shifted, the sound of my shoes against steel impossibly loud. Guess my date with bourbon is on hold, I said, mostly to fill the void. This time Zoe let out a small chuckle. I was looking forward to finishing my chess match online. The algorithm thinks it's winning, Kiara sighed. I was supposed to be on a date. He's probably still at the bar, thinking I stood him up. Honestly, that might be for the best. For a moment, there was the faintest flicker of humanity. The flashlight beam caught a small smile on Amani's lips before she turned it toward me. You seem agitated, Evan, she said. Not an accusation, an observation. I laughed nervously. Well, it's not every day I get trapped in an elevator with my boss. Her eyebrow arched. Silence stretched. I scrambled for words. Do you ever get nervous, Miss Cole? It was too personal, too off script. But instead of shutting me down, she tilted her head, eyes catching the glow of her phone's light. Not often. The way she said it, calm, direct, made my chest tighten. Must be nice, I muttered. Her gaze sharpened. What makes you nervous, Evan? The darkness dissolved my filter. Feeling stuck, I admitted. This box, not moving. It feels too familiar. The words hung in the air, raw and unpolishd. No one spoke right away. I could feel Kiara and Zoe's eyes on me. Then Amani's light shifted back to my face. She studied me for a beat. And then just barely she nodded. A tiny acknowledgement. And for the first time since the elevator stopped, I could breathe again. The elevator had gone quiet except for the faint hum of emergency systems. The thin circle of light from Amani's phone drew us closer together, like moths pulled toward a flame. Kiara sat down cross-legged on the floor, her voice sharp with sarcasm. Kiara, so this is it. 4 corporate drones, waiting for the world to reboot. Zoe traced invisible patterns on the steel wall with her fingertip. Quiet as always, but her eyes were alive, studying every flicker of emotion in the room. Amani leaned against the wall, arms folded, gaze steady. Her composure was unsettling, but also strangely comforting. I broke the silence. Evan, you never crack, do you? Not even a little? Amani's lips curved, not into a smile, but something like amusement. Amani. Cracks invite assumptions. Assumptions invite expectations. Expectations become shackles. Zoe tilted her head. Zoe, a pedestal is just another kind of cage. For the first time, I saw genuine surprise flash across Amani's face. She nodded slowly. Amani. Exactly. The words vibrated in the air. I felt something shift between us. Not rank, not hierarchy, but recognition. Kiara jumped in, her voice softer than usual. Kiara, People see me walk into a room and decide in seconds who I am. Too loud. Too ambitious. Too black. There's no in between. Zoe's voice followed, almost a whisper. Zoe, I give an idea in a meeting and it dies on the table. 5 minutes later, a man repeats it, and suddenly, it's brilliant. You start to wonder if you're invisible. My chest tightened. Their words mirrored my own bitterness. I found myself confessing again. Evan, 3 years of killing myself for this job, and I'm still exactly where I started. I feel like, no matter what I do, I can't get seen. Amani's expression softened, just slightly. She turned the light toward each of us in turn. Amani and I, you probably have earned more. All of you. But effort isn't always enough. You have to be seen by the right people at the right time. And sometimes, her voice sharpened, you have to know how to make them see you. Her words landed heavy, a challenge and a promise. The silence that followed was different now, less awkward, more contemplative. For a moment, the four of us weren't boss and subordinates. We were just people, suspended between floors, laying our truths bare in the dark. Then, with a low hum, the elevator lights flickered back to life. The car jolted and slowly began to descend. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The doors opened onto the lobby, bright and sterile. It felt like stepping out of a dream. Amani paused at the threshold, looking back at us. Her eyes met mine, then Kiara's, then Zoe's. Amani, think about what I said. All of you. And then she was gone, her red dress a streak of fire disappearing. Through the revolving doors, the three of us stood there, blinking in the light, shaken but strangely alive. Something fundamental had shifted. The next morning, the office looked the same, rows of cubicles, coffee machines sputtering, the usual corporate buzz. But for me, nothing felt the same. When I passed Kiara in the hallway, her eyes lingered on mine for half a second longer than usual. Not playful, not sarcastic, just knowing. Zoe gave me a small nod during the team meeting, subtle but loaded with memory. And Amani? She was the same immaculate force she always was. Crisp suit, hair flawless, voice like steel. She didn't mention the elevator. Didn't have to. When her gaze brushed mine across the conference table, I knew she remembered. During the meeting, a senior manager dismissed Kiara's suggestion about a new campaign. I saw her jaw tighten. A moment later, I echoed her idea, crediting her by name. The room actually listened. Kiara's lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. Zoe slid a data report toward me later that day, an analysis she'd been working on in silence. It was sharp, innovative. She never would have pushed it before. This time, I made sure it landed in the right inboxes. Something was forming, invisible but undeniable. We weren't a team yet, not officially. But the storm had pulled a thread, and now the whole fabric was shifting. Late in the afternoon, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple. A discussion. It was from Amani. Addressed to me, Kiara, and Zoe. If you're available, please stop by my office at the end of the day. My pulse kicked up. I leaned over my cubicle wall. Kiara already had the email open. Zoe's eyes wide behind her monitor. We exchanged a look, nervous, excited. At 6, we walked to her office together, a silent little procession. The door was ajar. Come in, Amani called. Her blazer was off. She looked less like an executive and more like a commander before a campaign. On the desk sat a thick folder. She gestured to 3 chairs arranged in a half circle. Sit, we did, her hands folded, her gaze unwavering. I've been thinking about last night. About being stuck. About being seen. Opportunities don't always fall into your lap. Sometimes you have to build the damn rocket ship yourself. She slid the folder across the desk. This is Project Lantern. High risk, high reward. Corporate won't fund it. But if we do, and it succeeds, you'll be impossible to ignore. The words hung in the air. Kiara leaned forward instantly, eyes blazing. Kiara, I'm in. Zoe's voice was quiet but steady. Zoe, me too. They both looked at me, my chest tightened. This was it, the chance I'd been craving. Evan, count me in. Amani's expression softened, just barely. Ame and I, good. Take the weekend to review the data. On Monday we start, but first dinner, at my place. Tomorrow night, strategy session. She leaned back, gaze sweeping over us like a promise. Amani, it's time we stopped playing by the old rules. I walked out of her office buzzing, my heart hammering. For the first time in years, I didn't feel stuck. I felt like the ground itself was moving beneath my feet. Saturday night, I stood outside a brownstone in Hyde Park, clutching a bottle of decent wine I'd overthought buying. The windows glowed warm against the cold Chicago evening. I rang the bell. Amani opened the door, not in her armor of corporate suits, but in a simple sweater and jeans. The shift nearly knocked the air out of me. Behind her, the smell of braised short ribs drifted through the hall. Come in, Evan, she said. Inside, the place was a blend of elegance and soul. Shelves lined with books, vinyl records stacked neatly, a framed poster of a 90s hip-hop group in the corner. It felt lived. Inhuman. Kiara arrived seconds later, bold as ever in a leather jacket, carrying a pie from a bakery. Zoe followed, hair tied back, a chess set tucked under her arm like a secret weapon. We gathered around the dining table. Wine poured. The food was incredible. For a while, it felt like any other dinner stories about childhood's favorite songs. Half embarrassing confessions. I learned Kiara wrote poetry, Zoe had been a chess prodigy, and Amani, our impenetrable VP, had once driven across the country in a beat-up car, just to see Lauryn Hill in concert. Laughter loosened everything. But eventually, Amani set down her glass, her voice returning to that steady command. Amani, we need rules. If we're going to do this, we do it right. Lantern isn't just a project, it's a rebellion, and rebellions need charters. She counted on her fingers. Amai and I. First, credit is shared and visible. No one disappears into the background. Second, respect is non-negotiable. Third, no old rules. If corporate won't back us, we'll back each other. Kiara leaned in. And fourth, Amani's gaze sharpened. Amani, personal boundaries. We're people before we're employees. If feelings cross lines, we deal with them openly. No secrets, no gray zones. Her words hung heavy. My chest tightened. The unspoken truth was already there, humming in the space between us, the pull, the connection that went beyond reports and spreadsheets. Kiara smirked. You're saying if one of us likes another? Amani didn't flinch. Then we redraw the reporting lines. HR gets notified. Transparency is protection. Zoe's eyes flickered between us, thoughtful. I swallowed, glancing around the table. There it was, the acknowledgement of something more. Not a choice yet, not a declaration, just recognition. The night went on. We cleared plates, moved into the living room. Kiara read one of her poems aloud, raw and funny and beautiful. Zoe set up the chessboard and beat me in 8 moves, her quiet grin more triumphant than any speech. Amani leaned back in her chair, watching us not as a boss, but as part of something she hadn't let herself have in years. When I finally left, stepping out into the cool night, I realized the storm had given us more than a scare. It had given U.S. the team a pact, a possibility. Monday morning didn't feel like a Monday. The 4 of us carried an invisible charge, like the storm had hardwired us together. We weren't announcing it, but everyone could feel it, 3 younger staffers suddenly orbiting Amani Cole. A little closer than before. We claimed a forgotten conference room on the 27th floor. The glass walls looked out over the lake, and the broken blinds gave it the feel of a hideout. We called it half-jokingly, the lantern room. Kiara covered the whiteboard in rapid-fire sketches, arrows, graphs, lightning bolts. Kiara, we're not just building a model, we're building a signal. Something stores can act on before the storm hits. Zoe pulled up her laptop, calm and precise. Zoe, the data's messy. Weather APIS, sales records, local events. We'll need a new pipeline. Just to make sense of it. I opened my dashboard prototype. Evan, if we visualize the predictions as glowing lanterns on a map, managers can see exactly where to move stock. No jargon, no spreadsheets, just light. Amani listened, silent at first, then finally spoke. Amani, good, but remember this. Isn't about being clever. It's about being undeniable. We don't want them to like it. We want them unable to ignore it. Her words became our mantra. For 2 weeks we lived in that room. Long nights, cold pizza. Kiara's playlists looping. On a Bluetooth speaker. Zoe muttered to herself in code. Kiara threw markers when her ideas got shot down. And I tried to stitch the chaos into something that looked like clarity. And Amani, she didn't hover. She sharpened us. A raised eyebrow here, a cutting question. There, the kind of presence that made you better just by existing. By the 3rd week, we had a working prototype. A glowing map that pulsed when a storm was forecast, showing which stores needed hot drinks, umbrellas, or generators. We were ready. To pitch. The meeting with the C-suite was scheduled on a rainy Thursday afternoon. We set up in the boardroom, lantern glowing proudly on the big screen. Richard Harlan, CFO, sat at the far end. Silver hair, eyes like stone. He flipped through our packet without expression. Richard, high risk, high cost, unproven. Kiara leaned forward, unflinching. Kiara, high reward. If Lantern had been live last month, we would have saved millions during the cold snap. Richard barely looked at her. Richard, projections, not results. Zoe spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. Zoe, we ran a backtest with 5 years of storm data. Lantern predicted demand spikes with 92% accuracy. Richard tapped his pen. Richard, and if you're wrong, we waste millions. Chasing ghosts. I jumped in, heart racing. Evan, we're not asking for a company-wide rollout. Just a pilot. 6 weeks. 1 region. If we fail, you shut us down. For a moment, silence. The rain battered against the windows like it was begging to be heard. Amani finally leaned forward, voice sharp as glass. Amani, you're afraid of risk, Richard. I understand. But being invisible is the bigger risk. Lantern makes Lantras impossible to ignore. Richard's eyes flicked to her. Something unspoken passed between them. History, maybe, rivalry. He closed the folder. Richard, pilot only, 6 weeks. And if you stumble once, just once, it's over. The meeting adjourned. My pulse was still hammering. We filed out together, the 4 of us silent until we reached the hallway. Then Kiara exhaled, grinning. Kiara, well, that went better than I expected. Zoe hugged her laptop like it was armor. Zoe, it's going to be brutal. I looked. At Amani, she was unreadable. But in her eyes I saw it, the flicker of something fierce. Evan, narration. The storm had trapped us once. Now we were choosing to step into another. The first week of the pilot was a blur. Zoe's code stitched weather data to sales logs. Kiara designed sleek alerts that glowed like fireflies on managers' tablets, and I hammered out dashboards with colors even finance guys couldn't misread. For a while, it worked. The first storm rolled through the test region, and Lantern lit up like a city of beacons. Stores shifted inventory. Shelves stayed full where they usually went bare. Numbers ticked up. We were high-fiving over takeout cartons when it happened. Zoe froze at her laptop. Zoe, wait, no. Lines of red error messages cascaded down her screen. The data pipeline had choked. Weather API changed its format overnight, and every prediction skewed off. The map flickered. Lantern's beacons turned into a mess of false alarms. Kiara. Groaning. You've got to be kidding me. Evan, trying to stay calm. Okay, we can patch. But Zoe was already typing furiously, eyes sharp with panic. Zoe, not tonight. This could take days, weeks, if they keep changing variables. The air thickened with dread. One stumble, Richard had said. One stumble and Lantern dies. Then my phone buzzed. A new email. Anonymous sender. Subject line. Favoritism. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. VP Cole is abusing her position, giving pet projects to favorites. Conflict of interest. Nepotism. Investigate immediately. I looked up at Amani. She was already reading the same message on her phone. Her jaw clenched, but her voice stayed calm. Ani. Of course, perfect timing. Kiara snatched my phone, skimmed the email, and cursed under her breath. Kiara, this is a hit job. Zoe's fingers froze over the keyboard. Zoe, HR will have to respond. Amani closed her laptop with deliberate calm. Ani. Then we give them nothing to find. Tomorrow, I'll request a formal review myself. I'll step off the reporting line. You'll answer to the coup until this is cleared. We all stared. Evan, you'd remove yourself just like that? Her eyes met mine. Steady. Amani, this isn't about me. It's about Lantern, and you three. If I have to bleed a little to keep this alive, so be it. The room went quiet. Kiara finally whispered, damn. The next morning, HR summoned us. The interview room smelled like stale coffee and suspicion. HR lead. An anonymous complaint has been filed. We take these seriously. Amani sat tall. Her blazer sharp, her tone sharper. Amani, I requested this meeting. Effective immediately. I'm recusing myself from the reporting chain of Patel, James, and Lee. They'll report to the coup. All project documentation is transparent. Here's the charter we drafted. She slid a folder across the table. Credit sharing agreements. Decision logs. Boundaries in black and white. The HR lead scanned it, eyebrows raised. HR lead. This is thorough. Ani, because I knew this day would come. You don't climb to my seat without people trying to cut the legs out from under you. Silence. Then the HR lead nodded slowly. HR lead, will continue monitoring. But for now, proceed. When we stepped back into the hallway, my chest felt like it had been squeezed by a vice. I turned to Amani. Evan, you just handed over power to protect us. She smirked, but her eyes were tired. Amani, power isn't about clinging. It's about choosing where to place it. For the first time, I realized just how much she was risking for Lantern for us. That night, we returned to the Lantern room. Zoe hunched over her code, Kiara pacing with restless energy, me rewriting presentation slides. Amani stood back, watching, her presence no less powerful even stripped of her title. We were bruised. But we weren't broken. Evan, narration. The storm outside had tested us once. Now the storm inside the building was doing the same. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. The Lantern room felt different after the HR hearing. We'd survived, but the air was heavier, charged with the knowledge that every move was being watched. Zoe barely spoke for the first hour, her fingers hammering the keyboard with surgical intensity. She looked like someone trying to stitch a wounded soldier on the battlefield. Lines of code scrolled fast, red errors turning to green checks. Kiara kept pacing, phone in hand. She was pulling guerrilla feedback from store managers in the pilot region. Every so often she'd throw her hands in the air. See? They love the idea. They need it. Before diving back into messages, I tried to keep us centered. Dashboards had to be polished, reports airtight. If Richard wanted numbers, I'd give him numbers he couldn't argue with. But the real shift was Amani. She no longer had formal authority, yet somehow she was more commanding than ever. She stood at the edge of the table, calm and fierce, guiding. Without dictating. Amani. Zoe, what's the risk if the API changes again? Zoe, without looking up. Hi, I'm building redundancy. Triple checks, fallback models. If it breaks again, it won't crash the whole system. Mani. Good. Evan, what's your story for the board? Evan, we're not pitching software, we're pitching survival. Lantern isn't a tool, it's a shield. Amani's eyes flickered approval, but also pressure. Late that night, Kiara dropped into a chair, hair mussed, eyes bright. Kiara. Pilot results are in. Stores that followed Lantern's signals had double the sell-through on weather-sensitive items. Coffee, heaters, even ponchos. Double. Zoe finally looked up, exhaustion etched into her face, but there was a spark in her eyes. Zoe, then we can prove it. We collapsed into silence, a strange peace settling over us. That weekend, Amani invited us back to her place. Not for food this time. Strategy. We spread papers and laptops across her living room floor. The chess set sat on the coffee table, unopened, like it knew Zoe's brain was already running on overdrive. At one point, Kiara sprawled on the rug, staring at the ceiling. Kiara, do you ever think about what happens if we pull this off, like, really pull it off? I laughed, dry. Evan, I'll finally be more than the guy who stays late and sends polite emails. Zoe, quietly, I'll stop wondering if anyone even sees me. The room went still. Then Amani spoke, softer than I'd ever heard her. Amani, if we pull this off, it won't just be a win for us. It'll be proof that being seen is possible. That the cage isn't permanent. Her words sank deep. We worked. Until dawn. Plans, slides, simulations. Every mistake was corrected, every weak spot reinforced. By the end, Lantern wasn't just a prototype. It was alive. On Monday morning, as we filed into the elevator together, Kiara grinned nervously. Kiara, funny, huh? Last time we were in here, the world stopped. I pressed the button for the 40th floor. Evan, this time, let's make it move. The doors closed, carrying us upward toward the boardroom and whatever storm waited on. The other side. The boardroom was a battlefield dressed in mahogany. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the storm clouds still hovering over the lake. Like the weather itself wanted front-row seats. We set up quickly. Zoe, plugging in the laptop. Kiara arranging the slides. Me double-checking the dashboard that glowed like a city map at night. Amani stood just behind us, hands folded, her presence steady as gravity. The executives filed in. Richard Harlan, CFO, took his place at the far end, arms crossed. His expression said it all. Convince me or die trying. I swallowed hard and began. Evan, Lantern isn't just data, it's foresight. It's the difference between empty shelves and record sales. The screen lit up with a map of the pilot region. Colored lanterns pulsed over stores. Evan, during last week's storm, stores that followed Lantern signals doubled their sell-through on weather-sensitive products. That's a 9.4% lift in revenue across the region. And zero wasted stock. Zoe took over, her voice calm, almost surgical. Zoe, accuracy, 93%. Error margin, 6.3. The system adapts in real time to changes in API formatting. We built redundancies after the first crash. Kiara leaned forward, her energy electric. Kiara, but numbers don't tell the whole story. Store managers said they felt prepared instead of blindsided. Lantern gave them confidence. That confidence translates to loyalty. Murmurs rippled down the table. A few execs leaned in, intrigued. Then Richard spoke, his voice smooth and cold. Richard, you're asking us to bet millions on projections. What happens when Lantern fails? When storms don't line up, when customers don't behave the way your models predict, the room froze. This was the kill shot. Before I could answer, Amani stepped forward, calm, controlled, lethal. Amani, Richard, risk is real, but invisibility is worse. For years this company has played it safe, and safe has kept us stuck. Lantern doesn't erase risk, it turns it into leverage. You want to stay relevant? Be seen, or be forgotten. The silence was electric. A chairwoman at the middle of the table leaned back, tapping her pen. Chairwoman, the pilot results are impressive. The logic is sound. I say we expand. A few nods. Richard's jaw tightened. I caught Amani's glance. A flicker of triumph hidden beneath steel composure. The vote was swift. Lantern approved for national rollout. When the meeting adjourned, Kiara let out a whoop the second the doors closed. Zoe allowed herself the tiniest grin. I felt like my chest might burst. Amani, as always, was composed. But when she turned to US in the hallway, there was no mistaking the pride in her eyes. Amani, you did it. Not me, you three, remember that. The elevator doors dinged open. We stepped inside together, the hum of victory still buzzing in our veins. For a moment, I remembered the night we'd been trapped between floors. The fear, the confessions, the cage. Now riding upward, I felt something else entirely. Freedom. Success doesn't come with champagne and applause. It comes with 2 a.m. emails, frantic calls from store managers, and dashboards glowing at all hours like restless ghosts. Lantern went live in 2 more regions. The lift numbers were undeniable double-digit growth in categories that usually tanked during storms. Corporate celebrated. Our inboxes exploded, but celebration came with pressure. Every exec wanted a piece. Marketing wanted control of the brand name. IT wanted to integrate, which meant break it. And Richard, of course, wanted to bury us under compliance paperwork. Through it all, the 4 of us moved like a unit. Kiara blazing ahead with bold ideas, Zoe smoothing the chaos with data precision, me translating everything into stories people could understand. And Amani still officially recused, yet always there, steady as a compass. One night after another 16-hour day, we crashed at Amani's apartment again. The table was cluttered with takeout boxes and half-empty wine glasses. Kiara flopped onto the couch, laughing. Kiara, we're basically living here. Does this count as rent? Zoe, sitting cross-legged on the rug with her laptop, didn't. Look up, Zoe. You'd have to pay utilities. All these servers running on her Wi-Fi. We laughed harder than the joke deserved, exhaustion turning it giddy. Later, the laughter faded into a quieter rhythm. I found myself watching them. Kiara's spark, Zoe's focus, Amani's steady calm. Something in my chest shifted. Amani caught my gaze. For a heartbeat, neither of us looked away. Then she spoke, her tone softer than usual. Amani, remember our charter. Boundaries, transparency. It wasn't a warning. More like a reminder that she knew what I was feeling, what we were all feeling. Kiara leaned over the arm of the couch, her voice teasing but edged with honesty. Kiara, boundaries are important, but connections are too. Otherwise, what's the point? Zoe closed her laptop, finally looking up. Her eyes were sharp, thoughtful. Zoe, the point is balance. We can't lose Lantern to something we don't name. The room went still. We weren't saying it outright, but the truth was there, pulsing like the lanterns on our map. The bond between us wasn't just professional anymore. It was more complicated, maybe dangerous, but real. Amani set down her glass, her voice low. Amani, if we cross lines, we do it eyes open, no secrets. No lies. Agreed? We all nodded, silent but certain. That night, nothing happened. No declarations, no confessions. Just the 4 of us sitting in the warm light of her apartment, letting the unspoken exist. But something had shifted again. Lantern was no longer just a project. It was us, our work, our risk, our connection. The next morning, back in the office, Richard cornered me by the elevators. His smile was thin as a blade. "Richard, enjoy your little spotlight while it lasts. Patel, storms pass, numbers fade. And when they do, so will you." The doors slid open. I stepped inside, pulse racing, but my voice was steady. "Evan, maybe, but for now we're the ones holding the lantern." The doors closed between us. Richard didn't wait long. Within a week, IT announced a mandatory integration review of Lantern. Translation: they wanted access to our codebase, our models, our work. Zoe's face went pale when the memo hit. Her inbox, Zoe. They could gut everything. One wrong commit, and the whole system collapses. Kiara slammed her phone on the table. "Kiara, this is sabotage, plain and simple. They want to drown us in red tape until Lantern suffocates." I looked at Amani. She was calm, but I could see the storm behind her eyes. "Evan, what do we do?" "Amani, we don't flinch, we tighten our process. Document everything. Build backups. If they try to break Lantern, we'll prove it wasn't us." That night, we worked in silence, tension hanging like humidity. I watched Zoe's fingers fly, Kiara muttering under her breath as she drafted stakeholder updates, Amani pacing the room like a general in a war tent. At some point, I caught Kiara's eye. She gave me a look that was half fire, half exhaustion. "Kiara, softly, I don't know if I hate this fight. Or love it. Evan, both maybe." Her smile flickered small, real. 2 days later, Richard struck again. He summoned us to a finance audit review. The boardroom felt colder this time. Less like a battlefield and more like a trap. "Richard, your projections are inflated. Your costs underreported. Lantern is a liability masquerading as innovation." Kiara leaned forward before I could stop her. "Kiara, that's not true. Stores in the pilot regions." Richard, cutting her off. "Ms. James, anecdotes don't pay shareholders." Zoe bristled, voice sharper than I'd ever heard. "Zoe, neither does ignoring data." I took a breath, forcing myself steady. "Evan, you asked for results. Here they are, real numbers, real revenue. Lantern isn't a liability. It's the reason our competitors are scrambling to copy us." Richard's eyes narrowed. He turned to Amani. "Richard, and you still pulling strings even though a char clipped your wings?" The room went quiet. Amani's voice was level, dangerous in its calm. "Amani, I'm not pulling strings. I'm standing with them. Because they've earned it. Something you'll never understand." For a second, I thought Richard might explode. Instead, he snapped his folders shut. "Richard, enjoy the victory lap, it won't last." When the meeting ended, we spilled into the hallway, hearts pounding. Kiara muttered a curse. Zoe hugged her laptop like it was a shield. I looked at Amani. She met my gaze, and for once, the mask slipped. She looked tired, human. Later that night, we regrouped at her apartment again. The wine was untouched, laptops glowing instead, but the tension had shifted. It wasn't just about work anymore, it was about us. Kiara sprawled on the couch, staring at the ceiling. "Kiara, he's coming for us. Harder next time." Zoe's voice was quiet, but steady. "Zoe." Then we hold tighter, to Lantern, to each other. I felt something rise in my chest, fear, yes, but also certainty. I reached across the table, resting my hand near Zoe's. She didn't flinch. Kiara glanced at us, then reached over. Her fingers brushing mine, Amani watched, silent. For a moment, I worried she'd shut it down. But instead, she gave a slow, deliberate nod. Amani. Then it settled. No secrets, no shame. We face him and everything else together. The air shifted, warm and fragile. For the first time, I realized Richard's sabotage had given us something he never intended: strength. Lantern's expansion was unstoppable. Within weeks, it was lighting up dashboards across half the country. News outlets ran headlines about Lantern's weather profit. Competitors scrambled. For the first time in years, I felt proud walking into the building. People looked at us differently now. They saw us dock, but Richard wasn't finished. On a gray Monday morning, an internal memo leaked. It accused our team of inappropriate entanglements, with leadership questioning the integrity of Lantern's results. The words were clinical, but the implication was poison, that we weren't just collaborators, but compromised. The four of us sat in the Lantern room, blinds half shut, the leaked memo glowing on Kiara's phone. Kira furious. He's dragging us through the mud. This isn't about data anymore, it's personal. Zoe looked stricken. Zoe, if people believe this, everything we built could collapse. Not because it doesn't work, but because they'll think we cheated. I turned to Amani. She stood with her arms crossed, her face carved from stone. Evan, what do we do? Amani calmly, we own it. We tell the truth, before Richard twists it. Transparency was always our rule. We hold to it. That evening, we requested an emergency meeting with the board. The air in the room was sharp, everyone buzzing with rumor. Richard looked smug, like a man about to watch his enemies fall. Amani stood. No slides, no notes, just her voice. Ani. You've all read the memo. Yes, I recused myself from direct authority over these 3 months ago. Yes, we work closely, very closely. Because that's what building something groundbreaking requires. What matters is this: Lantern delivers results no one else has achieved. Every number has been audited. Every pilot documented. If you want to kill it because we care about each other, say that. But don't pretend it's about the data. The silence that followed was thunderous. Kira leaned forward, eyes blazing. Kiara, you asked us to be seen. Here we are, no shame. No hiding. Zoe added, steady as stone. Zoe, we're not perfect. But the work is real. Lantern is real. And the only cage here is the one Richard wants to keep us in. All eyes shifted to Richard. His smirk faltered. The chairwoman finally spoke. Chairwoman, Lantern's numbers speak for themselves. The rest is noise. Approved for full national rollout. Richard's face darkened, but he said nothing. He'd lost. When the meeting adjourned, the four of us didn't cheer. We just walked out together, shoulders squared, knowing the storm had passed. Later that night, back at Amani's apartment, we sat in the quiet glow of the living room. No laptops, no charts, just us. Kiara broke the silence first. Kiara, so, what now? We won, but what are we? I looked around at Zoe's thoughtful eyes, Amani's steady strength, Kiara's fire. Evan, we're Lantern. Whatever form that takes. Amani raised her glass, the faintest smile playing at her lips. Amani, then let's keep the light burning. We clinked glasses. No fear, no secrets. Just truth. For the first time since that elevator stopped months ago, I didn't feel stuck. I felt free. 1 year later, Lantern wasn't a pilot or a gamble. It was the beating heart of Lantris Global. Every regional manager checked its glow before making a move. Analysts wrote case studies about it. Our competitors called it a miracle and a menace in the same breath. For me, it was life-changing. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was Evan Patel, the analyst who co-built the system that rewrote the rules. But titles didn't matter as much as they used to. What mattered was us. On a spring Saturday morning, I found myself in Amani's kitchen, the smell of coffee filling the air. She moved with that same controlled grace, but the walls around her had softened. On the balcony, Kiara lounged with a book of poetry, her bare feet propped on the railing, sunlight painting her skin gold. At the table, Zoe sketched patterns, in a notebook, pausing to push her glasses up her nose. I stood in the doorway, watching them, a quiet swell of peace rising in my chest. This wasn't a storm room anymore. It was home. Amani looked over her shoulder, catching my gaze. I, smiling softly. What? Evan, nothing, just this, all of it. Kiara laughed from the balcony. Kiara, careful Patel, you're sounding sentimental. Zoe glanced up, her eyes glinting. Zoe, he's allowed. We earned it. We had. Through storms literal and corporate, through sabotage and suspicion, through the risk of being seen and the danger of caring too much, we had earned this. My phone buzzed on the counter. A corporate report. Lantern credited with 11.2% revenue. Growth year over year. I silenced it. Numbers mattered, but they weren't everything. Amani poured 4 mugs of coffee, setting them down with deliberate care. Amani, Lantern is strong. But remember, so are we. That's what will last. We clinked mugs, not with the frantic energy of victory, but with the calm of people who had built something unbreakable. As sunlight poured through the windows, I thought back to that night a year ago, the elevator lurching, the darkness swallowing. U.S. hole, the fear of being stuck. Funny how the universe works. Sometimes it cages you so you'll learn how to break free. Sometimes it traps you in the dark so you'll learn how to carry light. I had wanted more. And I'd found it, in Lantern, in them, in us. Not just a project, not just a team. A constellation, and together we would keep burning. Asterisk, a year after. That storm, Lantern wasn't just a project. It was proof that even in the darkest cages, we can find our light. We had fought to be seen, and in the process, we saw each other, clearly, honestly, completely. That's the real victory. Not the numbers, not the titles, but the constellation of people who choose to stand together. If this story spoke to you, if you felt the storm and the spark within it, don't just walk away. Join us, subscribe, and be part of a community that believes in stories with heart, grit, and light. Because like Lantern, this channel shines brighter when we're seen together.